we've heard from Nigel Farage. He's basically doubled down this evening, said that he is entitled to his free speech. Does he have a point there?
Well, he's absolutely entitled to his free speech. But for a man who always claims to speak like Winston Churchill, he sounds an awful lot more like Neville Chamberlain to me. I mean, this, frankly, is appeasement. He's repeating the Kremlin's propaganda lines. And during the Cold War, we had a word for people like that. We called them useful idiots. And it sounds to me like Nigel Farage is just being Putin's poodle on this.
It's just interesting because we've got people who you've served in cabinet with in your party who have said that he should be welcomed into the Conservative Party. It just seems such a long way from you right now saying he's a useful idiot.
Well, it does seem a long way because it is a long way, because the reality is what we're seeing at the moment is we're seeing various people who've shilled for Moscow, who've found places in our parliament who frankly shouldn't be there. And that applies to Jeremy Corbyn and George Galloway, who is now, of course, supporting Nigel Farage. So I'm afraid it seems like we've got three different cheeks on this one, as Mr. Galloway might put it.
But what about the people in your own party?
Well, look, I'm very clear on where I stand on this. I don't think there's any place in Parliament or indeed in the Conservative Party for anybody who sides with our enemies.
So, sorry, are you saying you don't think there's a place in the party for people who side with Nigel Farage, people like Suella Braverman?
Who side with our enemies, as in who side with Moscow.
OK. But I'm just interested. I mean, what would you say, what do you think of people in your party who have sided with Nigel Farage? You say that he should be allowed into your party. You must have a view on that.
Look, I've been very clear on what my position is on various different people's membership. I think anybody should be able to vote Conservative, and I hope many, many people will. In fact, I'm asking many people to vote Conservative. But that's different from having people representing us in Parliament. And, you know, I think people who represent the British people in Parliament should put the virtues and interests and strengths of the British people first. They should aspire to some sort of to recognise the sacrifices of 80 years ago that we've only just been remembering. And they should recognise the struggle that people like Winston Churchill had to go through to mobilise an entire nation. And they shouldn't undermine that by repeating the propaganda of those who are trying to undermine us, to weaken us, and who, in fact, even in just the last few years, have used poisons to murder people here in the United Kingdom. And in the last few months, have used cyber attacks to undermine and weaken not just our economic defences, but also our health defences. They've attacked our hospitals and they've made people suffer in our healthcare when, frankly, this is all wrong.
Do you understand why people are choosing the Reform Party over the Conservatives? Why do you think that is?
Well, look, I think people should vote Conservative at this election because the real choice is between Keir Starmer and the Conservative Party.
But you've got to accept that you are losing votes to the Reform Party. Why do you think that is?
Well, I've got to accept that Sir Keir Starmer is the one who is currently front-running for Prime Minister. And I think what we've got to do is we've got to be very clear as to what that means. What he is not offering is some sort of minor tweak to our constitutional system. What he's actually offering is a very radical change that he's trying to embed in order to keep himself in power for many, many years by playing constitutional games. That's what votes at 16, that's what votes for the...
OK, we don't have anyone on from the Labour Party this evening to respond to this. But I guess my question is, do you think that the Conservative Party is kind of understands why they're losing voters to Reform? Or do you think there's too much focus on Reform and actually you should be thinking more about threats from the left?
Sophie, I have never told you what you should focus on. You're a journalist. This is a free country, and the free press is absolutely essential. If only other countries like Moscow, like Russia, would recognise that too. What we need to see is people focusing on what the real challenges are today. And today, one of the biggest challenges we're facing is the security threat posed by Moscow. Yes, in Ukraine, where Russian troops have raped and murdered so many civilians, claiming to be somehow Christian is laughable at the level of destruction and evil that they're spreading into that country, but also at the pain and suffering they're spreading into the United Kingdom. As I said, there are cyber attacks on our hospitals, cyber attacks on our businesses. This is directly hurting British people. This is interrupting operations, delaying treatments, and causing real pain in communities across our great country.
I was quite interested in a YouGov poll that found that 52% of people think Eastern European countries joining NATO has worsened relations between the West and Russia. What do you make of that? Do you think those people are wrong?
Look, I think that NATO is a free club of free members who freely choose to join. Many countries didn't choose to join for many years, countries like Sweden and Finland, and only joined recently when they saw the price of not being a member that Ukraine, sadly, was made to pay. And so I don't think that we should be telling free countries what to do. We think that sovereignty matters, rightly. We just exercised a vote only a few years ago, demonstrating that we are a sovereign country. And it would be completely wrong of us to tell other sovereign states that they shouldn't band together for their protection, particularly when they're sleeping next to a bear.
I want to talk to you a bit about the kind of broader direction of the Conservative Party, because inevitably, given the polls, there's talk of what happens next. I mean, I guess you want to be leader of the Conservative Party, don't you?
Well, look, Sophie, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we get as good a result as possible in this election, and I want to make sure that we win this election and make sure that we get to prevent Keir Starmer from making all the terrible changes that he's proposed already. You know, he's trying to raise everybody's taxes. He's talking about tax on capital gains that will mean that investment will go down and that businesses will suffer, reducing employment. He's talked about regulation.
Okay, sorry, it's just not really my question. I mean, do you think parties win from the centre ground? And do you think a lot of people think it's inevitable that the Conservative Party is going to tack to the right? Do you think that's what's going to happen?
I think Andy Street and others have demonstrated that when you're in the centre ground and when you're representing as many people as possible, that's when you make the biggest changes to the country. And the point about the Conservative Party is we're not a party of ideology, we're a party of government. We're a party of government because the ideas and the ethos that the Conservative Party has, pro-individual rights, pro-people, pro-business, are absolutely key to making sure this country is safer and more prosperous. And that's exactly what we're going to work towards. And I'm afraid what Sir Keir Starmer is working towards is higher taxes, deterring employment, pushing up unemployment, making it harder to start a business and making it harder to employ people. Now, all of that is bad for Britain. And that's what I'm focused on now.
You talk about Andy Street and the centre ground. Do you accept that the Conservative Party has drifted to the right?
No, I accept none of that. What I accept is that the Conservative Party is currently offering, I think, the best policies for Britain to prosper, not only over the next 5 years, but over the next 10. And what Sir Keir Starmer is offering, I'm afraid, is constitutional game playing in order to try and embed control and the worst tax and regulatory regime that we've seen in a generation that would lead to growing unemployment and falling businesses. OK. You've
also talked, when you wanted to be leader of the Conservative Party and you stood against Rishi Sunak, you talked about the need for a clean break. Do you think Rishi Sunak should be being more critical of Liz Truss and of Boris Johnson?
Look, I'm not going to tell Rishi what to do on this. The PM's pretty busy right now trying to run an election campaign. What I think we need to focus on is what we are offering the British people, because this isn't an election about the past. This is a vote about the future. And the choice is pretty clear. I mean, Sir Keir has been at least creditably honest in his talk about regulations. He's talking about making sure that no business can hire anybody in a test period. Effectively, the moment you hire somebody, you are responsible for them as though they'd worked for you for years. Now, that is a real change in employment law, which means that it'll be much, much harder for all businesses, but particularly small businesses, to hire anybody. Now, that will hold down growth, hold down innovation, and be bad for Britain.
Not long ago, you quoted Albus Dumbledore. I just want to read you the quote. You said, "It's easy to stand up to your enemies. It's sometimes harder to stand up to your friends." Have you been honest with Rishi Sunak about how you think this campaign is going?
Well, one of the things about being in Cabinet is that you don't repeat what you speak about in Cabinet outside.
OK, but how do you think the campaign is going? Will you tell us now?
Look, I'm always extremely frank with the Prime Minister. It's my responsibility to be completely honest with him. And I think that level of honesty is essential in a functioning government. What isn't appropriate is to comment outside, because that just reduces trust, and that doesn't help anybody.